a grandfather killed in his house in Oregon.
The victim was on the back porch. I had been told that a woman had possibly shot her husband.
The evidence appears to point to a tragic accident.
There's really no sign of any struggle.
A lot of mistakes happen in the dark. You can stub your toe or end up accidentally killing your husband.
I was trying to kill myself.
But when details fail to add up, detectives begin to suspect a cold-blooded murder.
In the bottom of a laundry hamper was a foreclosure notice.
She had built a house of cards on lies and deception.
And information from beyond the grave reveals the killer's deceit.
We're looking through this office. We come across this notebook.
The last thing he writes is, maybe I'll be on my own.
The little lies turn into big lies, turn into how do I get out of this?
Millersburg, Oregon is a town of about 3,000 people halfway between Portland and Eugene.
It's a small city in Linn County that really doesn't have much crime, much burglary, much theft, hardly any major crime.
In the early morning hours of November 16, 2015, this normally quiet community awakens to the sound of sirens as local sheriffs respond to a frantic 911 call.
My husband has been shot.
He's been shot?
Yes.
Ma'am, can you take a deep breath and tell me what happened?
I can't tell you. I don't know. He wasn't supposed to be here.
Okay, we're going to get help sent that way, okay? Stay on the line with me.
Deputies quickly arrive at the home of Ken and Roberta Samard, a couple in their late 50s and early 60s.
When police arrive on the scene, it's still dark outside. It's early morning hours.
They encountered Roberta. She was in the house, still on the phone with 911. They brought her out to the front porch.
They start talking to Roberta. She seems a little out of it. She is telling them, I did it, I shot my husband. But she had planned to die by suicide. Her husband, he was gonna leave for work and had at some point come back in and interrupted Roberta's plan to take her life. She happened to accidentally shoot him.
Roberta is taken into custody and held in the back of their patrol car while detectives arrive on scene.
I got paged out that a shooting that had occurred in Millersburg, which was only 5 to 7 minutes away from my house. As you walk in the front door, there's a glass door that leads out onto a wood porch. The victim, Ken Samard, was on the back porch. It was pretty easy to tell he was deceased. The gun was inside the threshold near that door. It was a pretty unique gun, like a snub-nosed .38 stainless steel, but it had pink grips on it. From the looks of it, probably a female's gun. I was told that it was a woman had possibly shot her husband, but he wasn't supposed to be there. I thought maybe this guy left for work, came back, and she thought it was a burglar and accidentally shot him. I have to look for a reason as to why this tragic event happened. And if it is an accident, we're gonna have to figure out why it happened. We needed to obtain some more statements from her, more in depth of what happened that morning.
Ken Samard was born in Albany, Oregon on January 25, 1958. He was one of 4 siblings raised in a blue-collar family.
Ken is a very hard worker. He always had a job. He grew up farming. When he was probably 16, he worked in the fields doing the combining, windrowing, and plowing. He graduated in '76 and he joined the Navy. He married his girlfriend, Vicky, and he was in the Navy for 4 years and was stationed various places.
He had a pretty funny, dry sense of humor. His personality was one of, I would say, good character. He really cared about people.
Ken was a very kind person. He went out of his way to help anybody. He loved to learn new skills, and just being there for his family and really helping his family, he loved that.
When Ken returned home from deployment, he found work as an engineer. But the time away had caused him and his wife to drift apart.
When he came home, the marriage didn't last very long, so they were divorced. And soon after that, he met Cindy.
My dad met my mom through my uncle and his girlfriend. I have 2 brothers. Brad is the oldest, I'm the middle child, and Matthew is the youngest.
Dad took us camping all the time when we were kids, and we'd go gold panning or go hiking or we'd go fishing or hunting or whatever, and just always kind of had a good time.
Unfortunately, his second marriage only lasted a few years longer than his first.
My mom and dad, they were divorced when I was around 2. My mom and dad both have really different personalities and wanted different things in life, and they kind of grew apart.
Starting over for the second time, Ken was now in his early 30s. He took a job at a paper mill in Millersburg, Oregon, and put his engineering skills to use as a member of the Oregon National Guard.
We were in the maintenance section. He was a mechanic, so was I. We became fast friends. We're traveling to wherever, the vehicles are that we're working on.
Ken spent the following years focused on his work and his children. Then, in 1996, 38-year-old Ken met the woman who would become his third wife, 43-year-old Roberta Bogart.
Roberta was at the mill. She was a secretary there. They went out on some dates, and next thing you know, they were together. She was previously married, and they had 2 boys. They grew up around here. Then they moved to Alaska.
We were living with my mom and we were in school, so it was just weekends that we would be with him. I was about 14 when Roberta and my dad started dating.
This is my dad. And Roberta.
She was nice, she was friendly, she always had a smile on her face, seemed to make my dad happy.
Before we knew it, they flew to Las Vegas and got married.
Will you have Roberta as your wife, to share your life with her, to speak the truth to her in love, to honor and tenderly care for her?
Yes, I will.
Five years later, the couple bought their dream home in Millersburg.
It's a 5-bedroom house with the huge barn, with the property, out of town.
He really enjoyed that piece of land that he had.
He would spoil her. Ken went and bought her a new car because he was making good money. They always seemed happy and go lucky.
13 years into their marriage, the couple's good fortune ended when the paper mill closed down and they both lost their jobs. But Ken was nothing if not resourceful.
He starts a company, he becomes a roofer, then he falls on hard times again. When he falls off a roof, he injures himself where he shatters both of his heels. Despite that, Ken is a fighter. He says, I'm gonna go back to school, I'm gonna learn a new trade. And so he begins studying to become an HVAC engineer. And so again, he picks himself up and he's studying to better his life.
Ken seemed very excited about HVAC school and getting out there to help people and just making a difference in someone's life.
At this point in Ken's life, his adult children, his 3 adult children are grown, they're out of the house, he's a grandfather, he's overcome some hard times, but he's with Roberta, they're living in their dream home that they had purchased, and he's got a new career. Things are looking up for him.
Ken's recovery is brought to an abrupt halt after another accident has resulted in his death.
Roberta's in the back of a patrol car. The deputies on scene had already went into the house, secured it. Ken, he appeared dressed for work. I mean, he had a jacket on, his lunchbox, a mug. His keys were back there on the back porch as well.
There's really no sign of any struggle. There are no, there's no broken glass. There are no pieces of furniture tipped over.
The scene appears to match what Roberta told officers, but they won't know for sure until they conduct a thorough investigation.
We did the preliminary exam of the body, and right in the crook of the neck, we found a gunshot wound. We're trying to determine, does this gunshot wound match what Roberta's telling us? The next step, there's going to be a detective assigned to work on an application for a search warrant. So while we're waiting for that, we went back to our sheriff's office and sat in an interview room and interviewed Roberta.
You're not under arrest or anything. We're just trying to get kind of the facts, and sometimes it's easier to bring you down here and interview you. So, can you tell me what happened?
I've been really sad, depressed. They're gonna take away our house from us, and I just couldn't face it anymore. I just couldn't face all that.
You're gonna take the house away?
The house is being foreclosed. I was trying to do myself.
The reality is that financial stress it can be massive. It can be overwhelming for a married couple. So people do make rash, drastic decisions.
She said she was going to shoot herself, and Ken showed up. It accidentally went off. He got shot, but in processing all sorts of possibilities, a lot of mistakes happen in the dark. You can stub your toe or end up accidentally killing your husband. So that's what we're looking for now, is that what evidence can we find to support Roberta's statement? Or are we going to find stuff that conflicts with that?
Coming up, Roberta reenacts the fatal shooting.
She says she's bringing the gun up to kill herself. It accidentally goes off and hits Ken.
But was it really an accident?
I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe her so bad.
Roberta Samard has just confessed to accidentally killing her 57-year-old husband, Ken, in a botched suicide attempt. Lynn County detectives press her for more details.
Roberta tells us when Ken left for work, she retrieves this firearm from the bedroom.
I was pacing around my house and didn't just do it instantly when I thought I had the chance, because all I could think of was my kids.
And did you think Ken had already left? Is that what you were thinking?
Well, he walked out the door. He left the house. He usually doesn't come back.
She tells detectives that for some reason he came back in to the house and caught her in that very moment.
I guess maybe he must have seen the gun in my hand. He must have, because he said, "What?" And he had this weird look on his face. And I said, "I love you." And then the next thing I knew, it went off.
She said when she's bringing the gun up to kill herself, it accidentally goes off and hits Ken. What would be my response if I saw my spouse doing something like that? You know, I'd probably reach out and try to grab the gun. Well, if there's a struggle, she pulls away, he pulls it close, she loses her balance, now the gun's up, now it accidentally goes off.
He saw it, and he would take it away from me. He's stronger than I am. So he saw it, and so I'm guessing, I don't know what happened.
You're thinking, man, this lady just was in a mental health crisis. Now she's just suffered this tragic loss. It's her husband. So yeah, not being able to remember minor details wasn't unusual.
Roberta's memory might be hazy, but she's clear about one thing.
Roberta maintains, I shot him, but this was not supposed to happen. This was an accident. I loved my husband.
We have a lot of these cases where somebody will kill their spouse and then kill themselves. Have you ever thought about that in the past?
Ever.
How about this woman?
Never. I would never think about her again. Never. Never.
Rather than taking Roberta's word at face value, detectives talk to the Samards' loved ones to gain insight into their marriage.
Ken and Roberta, they live alone. They don't have any roommates. You're interviewing family to see, oh, is it possible Ken's abusive? Is Roberta controlling? Nobody really says that. They describe Ken and Roberta as kind of the perfect couple.
Ken and Roberta did seem very happy when they were together. They'd be joking and enjoying each other's company.
In all the time that I knew him and knew Roberta, he never said a bad word about her, right? He really cared about her.
Ken's family was unaware of any financial troubles at home.
My uncle read in the newspaper that my dad's house was up for foreclosure. So he called my dad and said, "Hey, Kenny, what's going on with the house? Do you need some help?" And my dad said, no, Roberta's got it all under control. She said it was a mix-up and they changed mortgage companies or something, and she sent the check to place A and it should have went to place B, but it's all covered. It's all good to go.
Loved ones also say they're surprised to learn Roberta had been struggling with her mental health.
She was always smiling. She was, always positive, always up and going.
I never knew her to be suicidal or to be depressed.
Despite receiving positive impressions from family and friends, the timing of Roberta's attempted suicide and Ken's sudden return doesn't feel quite right.
It seems a little unlikely that at that very moment Ken might have walked in right as she planned to shoot herself, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
There were a lot of questions asked where she said, I don't know. And we're imagining stuff on just limited information. If we put that with the actual physical actions, we can put it in perspective.
To verify Roberta's version of events, detectives offer an unorthodox solution.
So here's what we would like to do today, is at some point, that maybe would you be willing to do a reenactment for that?
Okay.
You have two people, one person's dead, one story. At this point, she either didn't remember or he didn't grab the gun.
Roberta Samard claims that she has accidentally killed her husband Ken during a thwarted suicide attempt. Detectives prepare to return to the scene to allow Roberta to reenact the morning's events.
One of the things that helps us understand the chain of events that occurred is a reenactment. So once Ken's body was gone, we proposed that to Roberta to do the reenactment back at the house. She agreed. So we drove her back, and the house was still being processed for evidence and the like, but we did a video recorded reenactment. My partner played the role of Ken.
So let's go ahead and shut the door. And he's standing out there like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you open the door.
Like this. He must have been like right there. And when I opened up the door, I was standing like this, and he took a step back and he was standing there.
Okay. So you have the gun in your hand, right? Can you make a finger gun for me? Yeah. So you have a finger gun, and he's right there. And as you open the door, he's going to take a step back when you open the door, right? So when she opens the door, take a step back and then show me what you do.
I went like this.
It gave us kind of a perspective of how close they were to each other, which, probably 2 feet apart at most. So close enough to where, Ken could have reached out and grabbed it.
Roberta's reenactment suggests the barrel of the gun was about 18 inches from Ken when it was fired.
You think that's when it went off?
Had to have. I mean, there's not. But I don't think he grabbed me. He had to have. I don't know. I don't know.
The story Roberta's telling detectives makes sense when you look at the trajectory of the bullet. The way it entered through Ken's neck, he's almost a foot taller than her, and so she says the gun went off as I'm bringing it up to my head. That lines up.
How she portrayed it, it was possible. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe her so bad. But one of the things that stuck out in my mind was, here we are, standing at a glass door, looking out on a patio where just hours earlier, her husband died. There was no emotion, no tears, nothing.
After Roberta's confusing reenactment, investigators acquire a search warrant for the Samard home.
They need to search every inch of this house to figure out what happened here. There has to be more information. So they begin searching the house.
We're looking for any type of evidence that's either going to prove or disprove Roberta's story. It was a clean house. This is a well-kept, older person's home. Just looked organized.
In the course of their search, detectives find something out of place.
In the bottom of a laundry hamper was a foreclosure notice relating to the sale of Ken and Roberta's home for non-payment on the mortgage. It was rather weird where we found it because I know I don't, and I'm sure a lot of people don't file important paperwork in the bottom of a laundry hamper.
In an otherwise tidy home, it looks to investigators as though Roberta could have been trying to hide the paperwork from her husband.
Roberta's signature was the only signature on those foreclosure documents. Ken's signature was not on them.
In Ken's office, they find something equally intriguing.
They find a notebook that Ken had filled out. It was a really self-reflective type of notebook. And it gives you a peek behind the curtain of their marriage between him and Roberta.
Coming up, Ken tells his story from beyond the grave.
It's really the only thing we have that gave us his thoughts and his feelings. As I'm reading Ken's notes, I'm thinking, you poor bastard.
Just hours after the shooting, investigators are conducting a thorough examination of the Samard home. Having just found a foreclosure document revealing the Samards' dire financial situation, another piece of evidence emerges in Ken's office.
When we were looking, we go room by room, and as we're looking through this office, we come across this notebook.
It was found with his homework for the HVAC classes. It seemed like he would just been free writing, to get his emotions out.
In his notebook, Ken complains about the frequent conflicts in his marriage.
I had some notes in there about Roberta being controlling about money. Him always having to ask permission for money or permission to spend money. In and of themselves, they weren't really anything, but it started to provide an insight into maybe this marriage or the things that Roberta had told us. Maybe the relationship wasn't all peaches and cream. It spells it out pretty clearly that Ken does not have an accounting of where his money's going or their money's going.
It does mention that she's allowed to spend money, but when he spends the money, it causes an argument.
You really get this idea that he's helpless and that Roberta is the one who holds all the power in their marriage.
Toward the end of the notebook, Ken even writes about leaving Roberta.
The last thing he writes is, maybe I'll be on my own.
I think he was just probably about ready to sever that relationship.
To investigators, the notebook puts Ken's shooting in a new perspective.
It's really the only thing we have that gave us Ken's thoughts and his feelings. So that's the closest we could get to how he was feeling or what his perspective of the relationship was.
I never, ever suspected that there was any problem in their marriage or that my dad had ever even had those thoughts. From the outside, looking in, we thought Dad was happy. He was living his life. He was, having fun, doing what he wanted to do. And that wasn't the case.
Knowing the house was in foreclosure, detectives dig into where the money was going.
Roberta liked having the fancy things and basically being viewed in a certain light.
She liked to spoil her friends. She liked to buy them, extravagant gifts.
I just can't imagine if you don't have the money to pay for your house, why you'd be buying extravagant gifts from your friends other than give this impression that you're well off and living this fabulous life.
What they learned from this notebook is really important because detectives are looking at this wondering, could this be a motive as to why she shot him?
The notebook, combined with the foreclosure paperwork, start to paint a clear picture.
Whether Ken gave Roberta the impression that he was on the verge of leaving, probably in her mind, she knew that once he found out about the house, he was going to be done.
Investigators review Roberta's 911 call for further proof.
Roberta, I'm sorry. I need you to take a deep breath and try and calm down. Can you check and tell me is he okay? Can you tell me where he was shot? Okay, can you check on him? I want to send medics to help him. I need... You don't want to go see if he's okay?
There's a lot of things during this investigation that just didn't make sense. She can't tell the dispatcher where she shot Ken. She doesn't want to check on Ken. During the interview, she acts like she's crying, but there's no tears. You put everything together and there's this just a whole facade of a web of lies.
After a swift investigation, detectives sit back down with Roberta Samard, just 12 hours after Ken's death.
We hadn't had a chance to get the autopsy done yet, so we were operating on information that we had. Came back to the sheriff's office and had some follow-up questions.
Here's kind of where we're at. Obviously something bad happened today. The death was caused. In looking at your story and everything you've told us, it rises to the level of a manslaughter. So you will be arrested today. And I think you probably had that thought in your mind at some point.
No, I never dreamed that was going to be what was going to happen.
I think Roberta was in disbelief that she was actually getting arrested. In her mind, she thought she was going to be able to just walk out the front doors a free woman.
As Roberta spends her first night in jail, local TV picks up the story. And investigators receive a call from a local real estate investor that helps put the pieces together.
I was a house flipper, so I flipped homes, bought them at foreclosure auctions. And then I was watching the 11 o'clock news and was totally shocked. My mind is like, oh my gosh, that's my house. The next morning I called the sheriff's office, basically like, hey, I own the house now. Do you need to talk to me?
We learned Roberta had worked with the new owner to stay in the house for a few more weeks, which that time came and went. So she got another extension. We're surmising that Ken never had an idea.
The fact that the house was sold from under Ken's feet further cements detectives' suspicions.
They asked if I had spoken with the husband. Nope, never seen him, never spoke with him, only dealt with Roberta. And, in my conversations with her, she's like, oh, I handle the finances. I just don't want to upset my husband. Rather not evict her, so give her an extra week or so. And then next thing I know, the night before, we were supposed to get possession of the property, and her mugshot came across the screen. I was so shocked. She was just like a little older lady. Looked harmless.
Brian's statement appears to confirm Ken didn't know he lost his dream home.
The day Ken died was the day that they were supposed to be packed up and moved out of that house. There were no moving boxes. If I lost my house and I had to be out that day, and my house wasn't packed yet, I probably wouldn't be going to work. I'd probably be packing.
A month before all of this happened, my dad had started buying materials, and they were still sitting out back to build onto the porch. So why would he be doing upgrades to a house that is going up for foreclosure? My dad absolutely loved that house. He would have never lost that house, especially not for the minimal amount of money that was still owed on it.
It seems Roberta had spent months hiding the truth from Ken, but time had finally run out, and detectives suspect she acted out of desperation.
When you look at everything as a whole and you see the walls were closing in around her, I mean, they were losing their house that day. But all of that could also lend itself to Roberta's story of that she was extremely depressed and had nowhere to turn, and she was going to take her life. And so what detectives need is physical evidence that points to Roberta murdering her husband.
On November 17th, the day after Ken's shooting, the medical examiner performs an autopsy. Investigators hope it will provide the proof they're looking for.
The biggest finding in the autopsy was the wound Ken suffered was the close contact wound, which tells us that muzzle's going to be right up there, close and center. There's going to be charring sitting around the wound, and probably not going to happen from 18 or so inches away as she described it.
Roberta had told police she couldn't remember if Ken had tried to grab the gun to stop her from shooting that firearm. And what the autopsy revealed is there was no gunshot residue on Ken's hands, indicating that in all likelihood he did not try to grab the gun from her or interfere.
The evidence suggests her arm was outreached and she pulled that trigger intentionally to kill Ken Samard. The autopsy blows this case open. We sent the firearm to the Oregon State Police. We wanted to know what the trigger pull on that firearm was, because if it's one of those triggers that you barely touch it and it goes off, it gives credence to Roberta's story. In this case, it was a pretty hard trigger pull. I had interviewed some people that had taken her to the firing range, and she had struggled shooting the gun.
She had to squeeze that trigger pretty tight for it to go off, which tells them you did this on purpose. This was intentional.
Following Ken's autopsy, the charges against Roberta are increased from first-degree manslaughter to murder.
The trial was set for April 6, 2017 in the Lynn County Courthouse here in Albany.
The outcome of Roberta Samard's murder trial hinges on the interpretation of the medical examiner's findings.
The prosecution's trying to prove it was a close contact wound. The defense is trying to prove it wasn't.
The trial was long, hard. Images I will never forget. But my dad's always been big on justice. Like, you can't be a criminal in this world and not expect to pay the consequence for it.
After 8 days of arguments, the case is handed over to the jury. They take 5 hours to deliberate.
The jury comes back and sides with the prosecution, determining that Roberta is guilty of murdering her husband, Ken. Roberta is ultimately sentenced to 25 years in prison.
I think 25 years is kind of a petty sentence. However, going in at 63, the odds are against her. I honestly don't think that she'll make it out of there. That being said, as harsh as that may sound, I'm okay with that.
Despite her conviction, Roberta continues to insist she's innocent, and many questions still remain.
In this investigation, the hardest thing for people to get their minds around is the whole circumstances why Roberta resorted to killing Ken. What was the point of that? I still think it was going to be a murder-suicide. She was going to kill him and then herself. Maybe it was she wanted to save Ken from embarrassment of losing his house, but she chickened out.
I don't think at all that she was gonna commit suicide. She's not that kind of person. I think that she just planned it wrong.
She had built, a house of cards on lies and deception, and the pressure, caused her to snap.
I think it all could have been avoided if she would have been honest with Ken. I bet you he would have worked through it with her.
When I think about her and how he died and what she did, I'm still very much so angry with her and don't ever want to see her face, really.
Roberta choosing to kill Ken didn't solve anything. It didn't solve any of her problems. She destroyed her own life. She took away a man who meant a lot to a lot of people.
Ken was someone I looked up to. He always listened. You could tell him anything. So I try to be there for my child, and my family in the way that he was for me.
I just wish he was still here and could play with his grandkids and watch him grow up.
I want people to know that my dad was a good guy. There was no physical, mental, emotional abuse. There was none of that going on. He loved her. He took care of her. I feel like she owes us a reason why. We want the truth. Will we ever get that? Probably not.
The quiet landscape of western Oregon, stretching between the bustling centers of Portland and Eugene, is home to the small and serene town of Millersburg. With a population of approximately 3,000 residents, this close-knit community in Lynn County has historically enjoyed a peaceful existence, characterized by low rates of crime, minimal property theft, and an almost complete absence of severe domestic violence. It is a place where neighbors know one another, where the mornings are often shrouded in quiet mist, and where the rhythmic passage of the seasons defines the pace of daily life. Yet, underneath this tranquil surface, a complex human drama unfolded over several years, culminating in a tragedy that shocked the region and served as a somber reminder of how easily a manufactured reality can collapse with devastating consequences. To understand the tragic events that transpired in the early morning hours of November 16th, in the year 2015, one must first look at the lives of the two individuals. At the center of the story, Kenneth Arlen Samard, known to his family, friends, and colleagues simply as Ken, was a man whose life was defined by hard work, resilience, and a deep commitment to his family and country. Born on January 25, in the year 1958, in the town of Albany, Oregon, Ken was raised in a blue-collar household where he learned the value of labor at a young age. Growing up in a farming environment, he was working in the agricultural fields by the time he was 16 years old, operating heavy farm machinery such as combines, windrowers, and plows. His work ethic was matched by a warm, friendly personality, a dry and humorous wit, and a reputation for being exceptionally generous, always willing to go out of his way to help anyone in need. After graduating from West Albany High School, In the year 1976, Ken joined the United States Navy, serving his country for 4 years and gaining valuable skills as an engineer. His deployments took him to various locations, including the remote island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, where he served with the Mobile Construction Battalion, also known as the Seabees. Although his military service was a source of great personal pride, the long periods of separation took a toll on his personal life, leading to the amicable dissolution of his first marriage to his high school sweetheart. Upon returning to civilian life, Ken settled back in Oregon, where he eventually married his second wife and welcomed 3 children, Bradley, Danielle, and Matthew. Ken was a devoted father who loved taking his children camping, gold panning, hiking, fishing, and hunting in the beautiful Oregon wilderness, creating lasting memories of a happy childhood. Despite his efforts to build a stable family, Ken's second marriage also ended in divorce when his youngest child was still a toddler. Undeterred by these personal setbacks, Ken focused his energy on his career and his children, securing a stable job as a maintenance mechanic at a prominent paper mill in Millersburg. He also continued his military service by joining the Oregon National Guard Engineering Battalion, where he forged deep and lasting friendships with his fellow soldiers. Ken served with distinction for over 2 decades, including a deployment to Iraq in the year 2003 as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, eventually retiring from the military with 22 years of combined service. In the year 1996, at the age of 38, Ken met Roberta Bogart, a 43-year-old secretary who also worked at the paper mill. Roberta, who had been previously married and had 2 sons of her own, was known for her pleasant demeanor, her constant smile, and her seemingly positive outlook on life. The two began dating, and before long, they flew to Las Vegas, Nevada, where they were married in September of the year 2000. For the next 15 years, they appeared to be the epitome of a happy, successful couple. They purchased their dream home on Millersburg Drive, a spacious 5-bedroom house situated on a generous piece of property, complete with a large barn. Ken took great pride in this home and went out of his way to spoil Roberta, purchasing her a new vehicle and ensuring she had everything she desired. However, the stability of their lives was severely tested when the paper mill closed down, leaving both Ken and Roberta without jobs. Ken, ever resourceful and determined to provide for his household, started a roofing business. Unfortunately, disaster struck again when he suffered a severe fall from a roof, shattering both of his heels. This debilitating injury prevented him from continuing physical labor, but instead of giving up, Ken showed his characteristic resilience by enrolling in school to learn a new trade, studying to become a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning engineer. His children and friends observed his enthusiasm for this new chapter in his life, noting that he was focused on bettering himself and excited about his new career path. Beneath this inspiring narrative of recovery and mutual support, however, a dark secret was being carefully guarded. While Ken was focused on his studies and physical rehabilitation, the household finances had fallen into a state of absolute chaos. Roberta had assumed complete control of the family's financial affairs, a responsibility that she exercised with an iron fist, but a total lack of transparency. She harbored a deep desire to maintain an image of wealth and prosperity, seeking to be viewed in a certain light by her social circle. She frequently purchased extravagant gifts for her friends and indulged in luxuries that the couple could no longer afford, especially after the loss of their primary incomes and Ken's medical expenses. To fund this lifestyle and hide the dwindling resources, Roberta began neglecting their primary financial obligations. Over a period of many months, she stopped making payments on their mortgage. As the unpaid bills accumulated, the lending institution initiated foreclosure proceedings on their beloved Millersburg home. Roberta, desperate to prevent Ken from discovering her financial mismanagement, went to extraordinary lengths to hide the truth. She intercepted all incoming mail, particularly any correspondence from the mortgage company or the legal system. She physically hid court documents, letters, and warnings, ensuring that Ken remained entirely oblivious to the fact that their dream home was being taken away from them. When family members occasionally noticed public notices regarding the foreclosure in the local newspapers and questioned Ken about it, he confidently dismissed their concerns. Roberta had convinced him that the entire situation was merely a bureaucratic misunderstanding, claiming that they had changed mortgage companies and that a payment check had simply been sent to the wrong address. She assured him that she had the entire matter under control, and Ken, trusting his wife of 15 years completely, did not investigate further. He continued to plan for the future, even purchasing construction materials to build a new porch on the house, unaware that the property no longer belonged to them. The deception reached its absolute limits when the home was sold at a foreclosure auction to a local real estate investor who flipped houses. The new owner, attempting to be accommodating, negotiated with Roberta to allow the couple extra time to pack their belongings and vacate the premises. Roberta requested and received multiple extensions, claiming she needed more time, but she never informed Ken of these discussions. The final deadline was set for November 16th in the year 2015, the very day the new owner was scheduled to take physical possession of the property. Roberta had run out of time, extensions, and lies. There were no moving boxes packed, no alternative housing secured, and no way to explain to her husband why they were being evicted from their home. In the early morning hours of that fateful Monday, the silence of Millersburg was shattered by a frantic call to the 911 Emergency Dispatch Center. At approximately 10 minutes past 6 in the morning, a distraught female voice reported that her husband had been shot on the back porch of their residence. The local sheriff's deputies and medical personnel responded immediately, arriving at the darkened property within minutes. They encountered Roberta outside the home, still holding her phone, appearing disoriented and highly emotional. She immediately confessed to the responding officers, stating that she had shot her husband, but asserted that the entire incident was a tragic accident. According to her initial statement, Roberta had been suffering from severe depression and had planned to end her own life that morning. She claimed that after Ken left the house to go to work around 6 o'clock, she retrieved a .38 caliber snub-nosed revolver with pink grips from their bedroom. She walked around the house, trying to find the courage to carry out her plan, when Ken suddenly returned to the house, interrupting her. She claimed that he saw the weapon in her hand, stepped back onto the porch in surprise, and asked her what she was doing. Roberta claimed that as she raised the weapon toward her own head, it accidentally discharged, striking Ken in the neck. The initial scene appeared to support her narrative of a sudden, chaotic accident. Ken was found deceased on the back porch, dressed for work in his heavy jacket, holding his travel mug, with his lunchbox and keys lying nearby. There were no obvious signs of a physical struggle, no broken glass, and no overturned furniture. However, Experienced detectives from the Lynn County Sheriff's Office knew that the physical evidence must be meticulously analyzed to verify any self-serving statements. Roberta was taken into custody and held in a patrol car while investigators secured the scene and applied for a search warrant for the residence. As the investigation proceeded, the carefully constructed facade began to crumble. A thorough search of the home revealed an environment that was exceptionally clean, organized, and tidy, which made one specific discovery stand out as highly unusual: hidden. At the very bottom of a laundry hamper, detectives found the official foreclosure and eviction notices. The paperwork bore only Roberta's signature, confirming that she had actively concealed the financial disaster from her husband. In Ken's home office, among his heating, ventilation, and air conditioning course materials, investigators discovered a personal notebook. This journal served as a voice from beyond the grave, detailing Ken's private frustrations with his marriage. He wrote about Roberta's absolute and controlling behavior regarding money, noting that he was forced to ask permission for every minor expenditure, which often triggered severe arguments, while she spent money freely. In the final entries, Ken expressed a profound sense of helplessness and written thoughts of potentially leaving the relationship to be on his own. The physical evidence obtained from the medical examiner's autopsy proved to be the most decisive factor in dismantling Roberta's claim of an accidental shooting. The forensic analysis revealed that Ken had died from a single close-contact gunshot wound to the neck. This meant that the muzzle of the revolver was pressed directly against his skin when the trigger was pulled. A physical reality that directly contradicted Roberta's reenactment, in which she claimed the weapon was approximately 18 inches away from him. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet was horizontal, whereas an accidental discharge from a weapon being raised toward her own head would have resulted in an upward vertical trajectory. To further test her story, investigators submitted the revolver to the Oregon State Police Forensic Laboratory. Testing revealed that the weapon had an exceptionally firm trigger pull weight, requiring a deliberate and forceful squeeze to discharge, rather than a light touch that could occur accidentally. Additionally, forensic testing of Ken's hands showed no presence of gunshot residue, indicating that he had not attempted to grab or struggle for the weapon. Armed with this scientific evidence and the clear motive of avoiding the imminent exposure of her financial lies on the day of their eviction, prosecutors upgraded the charges against Roberta from manslaughter to murder. During the 8-day trial in April of the year 2017 at the Lynn County Courthouse, the prosecution presented a compelling case detailing the elaborate web of deception and the forensic impossibility of an accidental shooting. The defense argued that the physical findings could still support a tragic accident during a highly stressful mental health crisis. But the jury was not convinced. After 5 hours of deliberation, the 12-member jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty. Roberta, then 63 years old, was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with her earliest potential release date set for November of the year 2040, when she would be 87 years old. This tragic case offers profound lessons for families, communities, and law enforcement agencies alike. From a sociological and psychological perspective, the crime highlights the extreme dangers of domestic financial infidelity and the toxic nature of pride. The desire to maintain a false image of prosperity can drive individuals to commit severe acts of deception, which compound over time until they feel completely trapped by their own lies. To prevent such tragedies, absolute financial transparency in personal relationships is vital. Both partners must have open, unchecked access to financial records, bank statements, and official mail, ensuring that no single individual can secretly dismantle the household's stability. Furthermore, this case underscores the importance of heedful community intervention. When family members or friends notice warning signs of financial distress, such as legal or foreclosure notices, they must look past superficial reassurances and offer genuine, direct support. In this instance, Ken's family had raised questions, but they respected his privacy and accepted his explanations, unaware that he was being actively deceived by the person he trusted most. Open, non-judgmental communication about financial struggles can remove the shame that often drives desperate individuals to commit unspeakable acts. For law enforcement, the resolution of this case demonstrates the power of objective scientific investigation over initial verbal claims. The responding deputies and detectives did not accept the suspect's emotional confession at face value. Instead, they relied on meticulous crime scene preservation, immediate search warrants, and advanced forensic science to uncover the truth. The key to capturing the perpetrator and securing justice was the rapid collection of physical evidence, including the contact wound analysis, trigger pull testing, and the paper trail found within the home. By prioritizing forensic facts over subjective narratives, the investigating forces successfully honored the memory of Kenneth Arlen Samard, ensuring that justice prevailed and the truth was brought to light. The quiet complexities of human relationships and the devastating power of hidden shame often lie at the heart of the most unexpected tragedies. In the quiet landscapes of the human heart, just as in the tranquil neighborhoods of our towns, a slow accumulation of secrets can erode the strongest foundations. When those secrets involve financial ruin, pride can become a terrible driver of desperate actions. This is the tragic anatomy of a crime that shocked the small community of Millersburg in the state of Oregon, a town of approximately 3,000 residents situated between the cities of Portland and Eugene. Known for its peaceful streets and low rates of property crime or violence, Millersburg was the last place anyone expected a sudden tragedy to occur in the early morning hours of November 16th in the year 2015. To understand how this quiet community was shattered, it is necessary to examine the life of the victim, Ken Samard. He was born in the town of Albany, Oregon, on January 25th in the year 1958. Raised in a hard-working, blue-collar family, he was one of 4 siblings who understood the value of manual labor from a young age. By the time he was 16 years old, Ken was already working in agricultural fields, operating heavy machinery like combines and windrowers. After graduating from high school in the year 1976, he enlisted in the United States Navy, serving his country honorably for 4 years. During his military service, Ken married his first wife, Vicky, but the long periods of separation caused by deployments took a toll on their union, leading to an amicable divorce shortly after his return. Ken was a resilient individual who always sought to improve his circumstances. After his military service, he found work as an engineer and married his second wife, Cindy, with whom he had 3 children named Brad, a daughter, and Matthew. He was a dedicated father who took his children camping, gold panning, hiking, and fishing, always prioritizing family time. However, this second marriage also ended in divorce after several years, leaving Ken to start over once again in his early 30s. He secured a position at a local paper mill in Millersburg and joined the Oregon National Guard as a mechanic, where he formed deep and lasting friendships with his fellow servicemen. In the year 1996, at the age of 38, Ken met Roberta Bogart, who was 43 and working as a secretary at the same paper mill. She had also been previously married and had 2 sons. The two began dating, and their relationship progressed quickly, culminating in a wedding in Las Vegas. 5 years later, they purchased what many considered to be their dream home, a 5-bedroom house situated on a large piece of property with a spacious barn in Millersburg. Ken took great pride in providing for his wife, even purchasing a new car for her as his career progressed. They appeared to be a happy and fortunate couple to everyone who knew them. However, 13 years into their marriage, the paper mill where they both worked closed down, resulting in both of them losing their jobs. Ken, ever resourceful, started a roofing business to generate income. This venture suffered a major setback when Ken fell from a roof, shattering both of his heels. Despite the severe physical limitations and pain caused by this injury, Ken refused to give up. He enrolled in a technical school to study heating, ventilation, and air conditioning engineering, hoping to start a new career and continue contributing to his family. His adult children were grown, and he had become a grandfather, facing the future with optimism despite his hardships. This journey of recovery was cut short on the morning of November 16th in the year 2015, when local law enforcement officers responded to a frantic 911 call from the Samard residence. Upon arrival in the early morning darkness, deputies encountered Roberta, who was still on the phone with the emergency dispatcher. She appeared disoriented and immediately stated that she had shot her husband, but asserted that it was a terrible accident. She claimed that she had planned to end her own life due to severe depression and financial stress. But Ken, who was supposed to have left for work, unexpectedly returned to the house and interrupted her. She claimed that during this sudden encounter, the firearm discharged accidentally, striking him. When investigators entered the home, they found the deceased body of Ken on the back porch. He was dressed for work, holding his lunchbox, his keys, and a coffee mug, suggesting that he had indeed been preparing to leave for his day. The weapon, a snub-nosed .38 caliber revolver with distinctive pink grips, was located near the threshold of the glass door leading to the porch. Initial observations of the scene showed no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, and no broken glass, which initially seemed to align with the narrative of a sudden, tragic accident. However, as detectives began their meticulous processing of the scene, discrepancies began to emerge. Roberta was taken to the sheriff's office for a detailed interview. She explained that the financial burden of their home being foreclosed upon had driven her to despair. She stated that she could not bear the thought of losing their home and decided to end her life. She claimed that as she held the gun, Ken walked in, saw the weapon, and asked what she was doing. She stated that she told him she loved him, and as she brought the gun up, it went off, striking him in the neck. To verify this account, investigators requested that Roberta participate in a voluntary reenactment of the event at the home, to which she agreed. During the video-recorded reenactment, an investigator played the role of Ken. Roberta demonstrated that they were standing very close to each other, perhaps 18 inches to 2 feet apart when the weapon discharged. While her physical description of the trajectory initially seemed plausible, given the height difference between the two, detectives noted a striking lack of emotion, tears, or distress from Roberta during the reenactment, which took place in the very location where her husband had died only hours earlier. The physical search of the home soon yielded critical pieces of evidence that challenged Roberta S.'s story. In the bottom of a laundry hamper, investigators discovered a foreclosure notice indicating that the home was scheduled for a public sale due to non-payment of the mortgage. This official document bore only the signature of Roberta, suggesting that she had been receiving and hiding these critical financial warnings from her husband. In Ken S.'s office, among his academic papers for his engineering classes, detectives found a personal notebook in which Ken had been expressing his thoughts and feelings. The writings revealed a highly controlled household where Ken had to ask permission to spend money, leading to frequent arguments. Toward the end of the notebook, Ken had written about his unhappiness and his desire to leave the relationship, stating that perhaps he would soon be on his own. The investigation took a significant turn when a local real estate investor contacted the sheriff's office after seeing the news of the shooting on a television broadcast. The investor revealed that he had purchased the Samard home at a foreclosure auction weeks prior. He explained that he had dealt exclusively with Roberta, who claimed that she managed the household finances and did not want to worry her husband. Roberta had negotiated multiple extensions to remain in the home, and the very day of the shooting, November 16th, was the absolute final deadline for them to pack their belongings and vacate the property. This revelation provided a powerful motive. There were no moving boxes packed in the home, and Ken had recently purchased construction materials to make improvements to the back porch, proving that he had absolutely no idea they were about to be evicted from their dream home. Roberta had run out of time, and the lies she had maintained for months were about to be fully exposed to her husband. The final pieces of evidence came from forensic analysis. The medical examiner performed an autopsy on Ken and determined that the fatal wound was a close contact wound, meaning the muzzle of the revolver was pressed directly against his neck when fired. This contradicted Roberta's assertion that the weapon discharged from a distance of 18 inches or 2 feet. Furthermore, forensic testing showed that there was no gunshot residue on Ken's hands, which would have been present if he had attempted to reach for or grab the weapon during a struggle. Finally, mechanical testing of the revolver revealed that it possessed an exceptionally heavy trigger pull, requiring a deliberate and forceful squeeze to fire, effectively ruling out an accidental discharge. Based on this overwhelming evidence, the charges against Roberta were upgraded from manslaughter to murder. In April of the year 2017, she stood trial at the county courthouse. The prosecution argued that the shooting was a deliberate act of murder, committed out of desperation to prevent Ken from discovering the financial ruin she had caused. The defense maintained that it was a tragic accident occurring during a mental health crisis. After 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Roberta guilty of murder, and she was subsequently sentenced to 25 years in prison. Analyzing the motives behind such cases reveals a recurring psychological theme, which is the extreme fear of exposure and the loss of social status. Roberta valued being perceived in a certain light, often buying extravagant gifts for her friends, despite the family's dire financial situation. When individuals build a complex structure of lies to maintain an illusion of wealth or stability, the pressure of impending exposure can drive them to extreme actions. Rather than facing the vulnerability of admitting failure to their partner, they may perceive the elimination of the partner as the only way to avoid the shame of their secrets being revealed. The key clues that investigators rely on in these situations are almost always found in the physical reality of the scene versus the verbal narrative of the suspect. While a perpetrator can construct a plausible story, they cannot alter the laws of physics and forensics. The presence of charring on the skin indicating a close contact wound, the lack of gunshot residue on the hands of the victim, and the mechanical requirements of the firearm are objective facts that do not lie. Additionally, the paper and digital trails left behind, such as hidden foreclosure documents and the private writings of the victim, provide a clear view of the true state of a relationship and household. These tragic events offer profound life lessons for communities and individuals. They highlight the absolute necessity of financial transparency and open communication within marriages and families. Hiding financial struggles out of pride or fear only compounds the problem, turning manageable challenges into catastrophic crises. Seeking help early, whether through financial counseling or mental health professionals, can prevent the buildup of overwhelming pressure that leads to desperate acts. To assist law enforcement in resolving such complex cases more rapidly, several strategies are highly effective. Officers benefit greatly from securing the physical boundaries of a scene immediately and conducting thorough searches of unconventional areas where documents or evidence might be hidden, such as laundry hampers or deep closets. Utilizing interactive reenactments early in the process allows investigators to compare the physical claims of a suspect with the objective findings of forensic pathologists. Collaborative outreach to the local community, including financial institutions, real estate professionals, and neighbors, can quickly expose hidden motives and timelines that the suspect has spent months or years attempting to conceal. Ultimately, this case serves as a sober reminder that truth is an unyielding force, and the efforts of dedicated investigators ensure that justice is upheld, honoring the memory of those who can no longer speak for themselves. The quiet avenues of small towns often harbor an unspoken expectation of safety, a collective belief that the trials of the wider world will pass them by. In the state of Oregon, situated between the larger urban centers of Portland and Eugene, lies the peaceful community of Millersburg. With a population hovering around 3,000 residents, this small city in Lynn County historically enjoyed a reputation for tranquility, characterized by minimal property disputes, negligible theft, and an almost complete absence of severe criminal activity. For decades, the families who settled here sought the comfort of a predictable, close-knit environment where neighbors knew one another, and life moved at a gentle, reassuring pace. Yet, as history frequently demonstrates, the most profound human dramas and the darkest deceptions can quietly mature behind the pristine facades of well-maintained homes, waiting for a single moment of crisis to shatter the peace. In the early morning hours of November 16th, the year 2015, the silence of this sleeping community was abruptly broken by the urgent, rising wail of emergency sirens. Local sheriffs and first responders were racing toward a residence on a frantic mission, guided by a highly distressed emergency call. The voice on the line belonged to a woman named Roberta Samard, who reported that her husband, Ken Samard, had been shot. She conveyed to the dispatcher a state of utter panic, repeating that her husband was not supposed to be there and pleading for immediate assistance. When the deputies arrived at the property under the cover of the pre-dawn darkness, they were met with a scene that initially presented itself as a deeply tragic domestic accident, but would soon unravel into a complex investigation of cold-blooded deception. The deputies encountered Roberta outside the home, still holding the telephone that connected her to the emergency dispatchers. To the responding officers, she appeared highly disoriented, emotionally overwhelmed, and deeply distressed by the unfolding events. Almost immediately, she began offering an explanation that blamed a sudden, desperate mental health crisis. She stated to the officers that she had made the decision to end her own life, retrieving a firearm in the quiet of the morning, after believing her husband had already departed for his daily work routine. According to her narrative, Ken had unexpectedly returned to the house, interrupting her actions on the back porch. In the ensuing confusion, and what she described as a physical scramble of surprise, she claimed the firearm had accidentally discharged, striking her husband and instantly ending his life. This account, while profoundly tragic, initially carried a plausible weight for the first responders. Financial strain, personal despair, and sudden domestic accidents are realities that law enforcement officers encounter with unfortunate regularity. As Roberta was placed gently into the secure environment of a patrol vehicle to shield her from the chilly morning air, and to allow investigators to secure the scene, detectives began their methodical examination of the property. The home itself was a beautifully kept, 5-bedroom residence situated on a spacious plot of land featuring a large barn. It was the kind of property that spoke of decades of hard labor, pride of ownership, and a comfortable retirement. Yet, as the sun began to rise over Millersburg, the physical reality of the scene began to present subtle, quiet challenges to the narrative of a spontaneous accident. Upon entering the residence, investigators noted the immaculate condition of the interior. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass, and no indications of a violent confrontation. Walking through the front entryway led directly to a glass door that opened onto a wooden back porch. It was on this porch that the body of 57-year-old Ken Samard was discovered. He was dressed fully for his workday, wearing a heavy jacket and carrying his lunchbox, a travel mug, and his set of keys. The placement of these items suggested he was prepared to step out into the morning, rather than entering a dynamic situation within the home. Resting near the threshold of the door was the firearm in question, a highly distinctive snub-nosed point, .38 caliber stainless steel revolver, fitted VKEP, ITA, bright pink grips, a design typically favored by female owners for personal defense. To understand the gravity of the loss, one must examine the life of the man who lay deceased on the wooden deck. Ken Samard was born in the town of Albany, Oregon, on January 25th, the year 1958. Raised in a blue-collar family alongside 3 siblings, Ken developed a profound work ethic at an early age. By the time he was 16 years old, he was already working long hours in the local agricultural fields, operating heavy machinery such as combines, windrowers, and plows. Following his graduation from high school in the year 1976, he chose to serve his country by joining the United States Navy, embarking on a 4-year tour of duty that stationed him in various locations across the globe. Those who knew him during his youth and military service recalled a man of quiet strength, a dry and engaging sense of humor, and an unwavering commitment to helping anyone in need. He was a person who took immense pride in learning new practical skills and dedicating his spare time to supporting his family. Upon returning to civilian life, Ken transitioned into engineering. Though the long separations of military deployment had taken a toll on his personal life, leading to the amicable dissolution of his first marriage, he later remarried, welcoming 3 children into the world, Brad, his daughter, and his youngest son, Matthew. As a father, Ken was remembered as an active, outdoors-loving guide who regularly took his children camping, fishing, hunting, and gold panning, creating a childhood-filled vekep aite exploration and laughter. Despite his best efforts, his second marriage also ended after a few years, a result of differing personal paths rather than animosity. Undeterred by life's setbacks, Ken, now in his early 30s, secured a position at a paper mill in Millersburg and joined the Oregon National Guard as a skilled mechanic, forging deep, lifelong friendships with his fellow servicemen who admired his reliability and technical expertise. In the year 1996, at the age of 38, Ken met 43-year-old Roberta Bogart, who was working as a secretary at the very same paper mill. Roberta, a mother of 2 sons from a previous marriage, quickly captured Ken's affection with her warm smile, friendly demeanor, and positive outlook. The couple's relationship blossomed rapidly, culminating in a wedding ceremony in Las Vegas. 5 years later, they purchased their dream home in Millersburg, a spacious property where Ken could indulge his passion for land management and construct a comfortable life for his wife. He was a husband who took joy in spoiling his partner, eventually purchasing a brand new vehicle for her as his career progressed. For over a decade, friends and family viewed them as an exceptionally happy, stable, and fortunate couple. However, the stability of their lives was severely tested when the paper mill closed its doors, resulting in both Ken and Roberta losing their employment. Rather than succumbing to defeat, Ken demonstrated his characteristic resourcefulness. He founded a roofing business to generate income, demonstrating a willingness to adapt to any circumstance. When a severe accident on a job site resulted in shattered heels and a long, painful recovery, Ken refused to let physical limitations define him. He enrolled in an engineering program focused on heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, eager to master a new trade and continue contributing to his household. To his adult children, his siblings, and his friends, Ken appeared to be a man successfully navigating life's transitions, supported fully by a loving wife in a beautiful home. This public perception of domestic bliss made the events of November 16th all the more shocking to the community. As detectives initiated their formal interviews with Roberta at the Lynn County Sheriff's Office, they sought to understand the psychological state that would lead a woman to the brink of self-harm. In the interview room, Roberta painted a picture of overwhelming despair. She claimed that the burden of financial distress had become too heavy to bear, revealing to the investigators that their beloved home was actively facing foreclosure. She explained that she felt utterly incapable of facing the humiliation and ruin of losing their property, which drove her to decide to end her life. She recounted that, as she prepared to carry out her plan, Ken unexpectedly walked back through the door, causing her to panic. She claimed that he saw the firearm, asked what she was doing, and stepped toward her to intervene. In the physical movement of his attempt to protect her, she alleged, the firearm discharged accidentally, striking him in the neck. Detectives, trained to balance empathy with objective analysis, listened to this narrative with a careful ear. They understood that severe financial pressure can indeed drive individuals to desperate measures, and they initially approached the situation with the sensitivity required for a grieving spouse who had survived a traumatic event. Yet, the duties of law enforcement demand that every assertion be verified by physical evidence. To establish the precise sequence of events, detectives proposed an unorthodox but highly effective investigative step. a voluntary physical reenactment of the shooting at the residence. Roberta agreed to participate, returning to the home where her husband had passed away just hours prior. During the recorded reenactment, an investigator stood in the position of Ken, while Roberta demonstrated how she held the firearm. She positioned herself near the back door, indicating that the muzzle of the weapon was approximately 18 inches away from her husband when it discharged. She described a sudden, chaotic moment where Ken reacted to the sight of the gun, though she remained vague about whether a physical struggle over the weapon actually occurred, repeatedly stating that her memory was hazy due to the trauma. Throughout this process, investigators noted a subtle but profound detail that did not align with the typical behavioral patterns of a grieving spouse. Despite standing in the exact location where her partner of nearly 2 decades had just lost his life, Roberta exhibited a remarkable absence of outward emotion, shedding no tears and maintaining a highly detached, calm demeanor. This emotional incongruence prompted investigators to intensify their physical search of the property. Armed ve capite, hat a search warrant. Forensic technicians examined every room of the immaculately organized house. In the course of their search, they encountered a piece of evidence that immediately raised suspicions. Tucked away at the absolute bottom of a large laundry hamper, buried beneath soiled clothing, was an official legal document. An active foreclosure notice detailing the impending sale of the property due to non-payment of the mortgage. This discovery was highly unusual. In a home that was otherwise exceptionally neat and organized, with important documents typically filed in dedicated office spaces, the placement of a critical legal notice at the bottom of a laundry basket suggested an active effort to conceal the information. Furthermore, a close examination of the documents revealed that only Roberta S.'s signature was present. Ken S.'s signature was entirely absent from any of the correspondence. The search then moved to Ken S.'s personal office space, where detectives discovered a handwritten notebook nestled among his coursework for his engineering classes. This notebook served as an invaluable voice from beyond the grave, offering an unfiltered look at the reality of the Samard marriage. In his writings, Ken had documented a history of severe marital conflict revolving almost entirely around finances. He wrote of Roberta S.'s highly controlling behavior regarding money, noting that he was subjected to intense arguments whenever he wished to make a purchase, while she maintained absolute authority over the household funds. The entries painted a portrait of a husband who felt increasingly isolated, financially blindfolded, and emotionally exhausted. Crucially, the final entries in the notebook contained a poignant reflection where Ken mused that perhaps he would soon be on his own, indicating he was actively contemplating ending the marriage. These discoveries completely reframed the investigation. Rather than a sudden, spontaneous tragedy born of a shared financial crisis, detectives began to suspect a calculated campaign of deception. Financial investigations quickly revealed that Roberta had spent years cultivating a false persona of wealth and success among her social circle, frequently purchasing extravagant gifts for her friends and indulging in luxury items, despite the couple's severe lack of income following the paper mill closure. To maintain this illusion of prosperity, she had systematically neglected the mortgage payments, driving their dream home into foreclosure while actively hiding the reality from her husband. When family members had previously questioned Ken about rumors of foreclosure, he had confidently dismissed them, stating that Roberta had assured him it was merely an administrative mix-up that she had fully resolved. The deception reached an absolute crisis point on the very day of the shooting. Investigators received a crucial telephone call from a local real estate investor who had purchased the Samard home at a foreclosure auction weeks prior. The investor revealed that he had been dealing exclusively with Roberta, who had repeatedly begged for extensions to pack their belongings, claiming she did not want to worry her husband. The absolute final deadline for the couple to vacate the property was scheduled for the morning of November 16th, the exact day Ken was killed. Yet, when detectives examined the home, there were no moving boxes, no packed suitcases, and no preparations for departure. In fact, Ken had recently purchased construction materials to build an extension on the back porch, a clear indication that he believed they would be living in the home for years to come. With the timeline established, the physical evidence began to directly contradict Roberta's version of the shooting. The medical examiner's autopsy of Ken Samard revealed that the fatal wound to his neck was a close contact injury. This meant that the muzzle of the firearm was pressed directly against his skin when the trigger was pulled, a physical reality that left distinct charring and soot patterns. This finding completely disproved Roberta's claim that the weapon had discharged from a distance of 18 inches during a sudden movement. Furthermore, the autopsy confirmed that there was absolutely no gunpowder residue on Ken's hands, a detail that proved he had never reached for or attempted to grab the firearm. Finally, tests conducted by the State Police Forensic Laboratory determined that the revolver possessed an exceptionally heavy trigger pull, requiring a deliberate, forceful squeeze to fire, thereby ruling out any possibility of an accidental discharge from a simple slip or bump. The evidence painted a chilling picture of the final moments on the porch. Faced with the imminent arrival of the new property owner and the unavoidable exposure of her years of financial deceit and lies, Roberta had stood before her husband as he prepared to leave for work. She had raised the firearm, pressed it directly against his neck, and pulled the heavy trigger, ending his life in an attempt to prevent him from ever discovering the ruin she had brought upon their lives. Armed with this overwhelming combination of forensic ballistics, financial records, and the poignant written testimony of the victim himself, prosecutors charged Roberta with murder. In the year 2017, following an 8-day trial that thoroughly exposed the house of cards she had built, a jury deliberated for 5 hours before finding her guilty. At the age of 63, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison, ensuring that she would spend the remainder of her life answering for the tragic betrayal of a man who had loved and trusted her. Analyzing the profound motives behind such domestic crimes reveals a recurring psychological pattern that law enforcement and behavioral experts encounter across many similar cases. The primary catalyst in this tragedy was not merely financial distress, but the intense, destructive power of social shame and the desperate desire to preserve a fabricated identity. Roberta had constructed a complex personal narrative of wealth, generosity, and success. In her mind, admitting the truth of their financial failure was an option far worse than violence. This phenomenon is surprisingly common in domestic homicides, where a perpetrator chooses to commit a terrible act rather than face the exposure of a long-standing lie. The escalation from small, seemingly harmless deceptions regarding monthly bills to massive, catastrophic falsehoods, like the unannounced sale of a family home, represents a psychological trap. As the lies accumulate, the individual feels increasingly cornered, eventually viewing the elimination of the person who would expose them as the only viable exit. For investigators, solving such cases requires a meticulous focus on the physical and digital clues that lie beneath the surface of a suspect's initial statement. The most critical tool in the detective's arsenal is not intuition, but the relentless cross-referencing of objective physical evidence against the human narrative. In this case, the forensic examination of the wound trajectory, the soot deposition, the absence of residue on the victim's hands, and the mechanical testing of the firearm's trigger pull served as absolute, undeniable facts that expose the impossibility of the suspect's claims. Additionally, the discovery of hidden documentation and the recovery of personal diaries provide invaluable context, allowing the victim to speak from the past and lay bare the true dynamics of the relationship. Modern policing benefits immensely from this multidisciplinary approach, combining advanced forensic science, vkepte, old-fashioned document retrieval, and financial auditing to reconstruct the truth. From this heartbreaking case, society can draw profound life lessons regarding the critical importance of absolute transparency and open communication within relationships, particularly regarding financial matters. A healthy partnership cannot survive on blind trust alone. It requires active, mutual participation in the responsibilities of daily life. When one partner assumes complete, unquestioned control over finances and actively discourages the other from participating, it creates a dangerous imbalance that can mask severe problems. Recognizing the warning signs of controlling behavior, such as extreme secrecy regarding mail, bank accounts, or legal notices, is essential for self-protection. Furthermore, the community must foster an environment where individuals feel safe, seeking help for financial crises and mental health struggles, reducing the stigma of failure that so often drives desperate people toward destructive paths. To catch perpetrators faster and prevent similar tragedies from unfolding, law enforcement agencies can continually refine their investigative strategies by implementing several key practices. First, immediate and comprehensive financial background checks should be initiated in any domestic death investigation, as economic motives are frequently hidden beneath layers of personal drama. Second, training officers to recognize the subtle, non-verbal indicators of psychological detachment and emotional incongruence can help identify deceptive narratives early in the process. Third, the rapid utilization of physical reenactments, as demonstrated in this case, serves as a powerful method to lock a suspect into a specific physical account of events, which can then be easily tested and disproved by forensic specialists. Finally, establishing strong public databases and alert systems for civil actions, such as foreclosures and property transfers, can ensure that homeowners are directly notified of critical changes, preventing dishonest partners from hiding ruinous financial actions. Through these combined efforts of forensic precision, community vigilance, and systemic transparency, society can better honor the memory of victims like Ken Samard and work to ensure that the light of justice always exposes the shadows of deception. The quiet community of Millersburg in Lynn County, Oregon, is a peaceful place where major crimes are exceedingly rare. Located halfway between Portland and Eugene, this small city of approximately 3,000 residents has traditionally enjoyed a tranquil existence, far removed from the complex challenges often associated with larger urban areas. The citizens of this region have long valued their quiet neighborhoods, their close community ties, and the general sense of safety that defines their daily lives. However, The veneer of peace can sometimes obscure the deeply hidden struggles occurring behind closed doors, proving that no community is entirely immune to the complexities of human tragedy. The peaceful nature of Millersburg was dramatically disrupted in the early morning hours of November 16, 2015. As dawn approached, the quiet air was shattered by the sound of sirens as local sheriff deputies rushed to respond to a frantic emergency call. The call had been placed by Roberta Samard, a woman in her early 60s, who reported that her husband, Ken Samard, had been shot. During her conversation with the emergency dispatcher, Roberta made a statement that immediately drew the attention of experienced investigators. She remarked that her husband was not supposed to be at the home at that time, a comment that introduced an immediate element of confusion and raised subtle questions about the sequence of events. Upon arriving at the residence, deputies encountered Roberta Samard, who was still on the telephone with the emergency operator. The deputies escorted her to the front of the property to establish safety and begin gathering information. Roberta appeared to be disoriented and was visibly distressed. She explained to the initial responders that she had been experiencing a profound mental health crisis and had formed a plan to end her own life. According to her initial account, her husband had left for work but unexpectedly returned to the house, interrupting her actions. She claimed that in the ensuing moments, the weapon discharged accidentally, resulting in the fatal injury to her husband. While Roberta was placed in the care of deputies, investigators began a meticulous examination of the residence. The home was remarkably tidy and well organized, reflecting the care of its occupants. Upon entering the back porch, investigators discovered the deceased victim, Ken Samard. He was dressed for his workday, wearing a jacket and carrying his lunchbox, a mug, and his keys. There were no visible signs of a physical struggle in the area, such as broken glass, disturbed furniture, or disarray. Near the threshold of the doorway, police located the firearm, which was a .38 caliber stainless steel revolver with distinctive pink grips, a design often associated with female ownership. To understand the context of this tragedy, investigators began looking into the life of Ken Samard. Born in Albany, Oregon on January 25, 1958, Ken was raised in a hard-working, blue-collar family alongside 4 siblings. From a young age, he demonstrated an exceptional work ethic, working in agricultural fields at the age of 16. After graduating from high school in 1976, he joined the Navy, serving honorably for 4 years. Following his military service, Ken established a career as a skilled mechanic and engineer, joining the Oregon National Guard, where he made lasting friendships. Though he experienced 2 previous marriages that ended in divorce, he was a deeply devoted father to his 3 children, frequently taking them camping, fishing, and gold panning, creating cherished memories. In 1996, at the age of 38, Ken met Roberta Bogart, who was 43 years old and working as a secretary at the local paper mill. The couple married in Las Vegas and eventually purchased a beautiful 5-bedroom house on a spacious property in Millersburg. Despite experiencing significant setbacks, years later when the paper mill closed and both lost their employment, Ken remained resilient. He started a roofing business and, even after surviving a severe fall that shattered both of his heels, he returned to school to study heating, ventilation, and air conditioning to rebuild his career and support his family. He was described by those who knew him as a kind, generous, and hardworking man who loved his family deeply. As the investigation progressed, detectives conducted a detailed interview with Roberta Samard at the sheriff office. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by immense financial stress, revealing that their home was facing foreclosure. She stated that she could not bear the thought of losing the property and decided to end her life. She claimed that when Ken unexpectedly returned, he attempted to intervene, and the weapon discharged during the brief encounter. While the detectives approached her avec empathy, recognizing the gravity of her distress, they remained committed to verifying her account through objective evidence. To clarify the physical dynamics of the incident, investigators proposed a voluntary reenactment of the events. Roberta agreed to participate, and detectives returned with her to the residence. During the video-recorded reenactment, a detective portrayed the role of Ken. Roberta demonstrated how she held the weapon, suggesting she was standing approximately 18 inches away from her husband when the discharge occurred. While her physical demonstration seemed superficially consistent with the trajectory of the injury, detectives noted a striking lack of emotional response from her during the process, which stood in sharp contrast to the gravity of the situation. A deeper search of the home yielded critical discoveries that began to challenge the accidental narrative. In the bottom of a laundry hamper, investigators located an important document, which was a formal foreclosure notice regarding the pending sale of the property. Curiously, the document bore only the signature of Roberta, indicating that she had actively concealed the financial crisis from her husband. In Ken's office, among his study materials for his technical courses, detectives discovered a personal notebook. The entries in the notebook provided an invaluable perspective from the past, detailing Ken's frustrations with financial control within the marriage, his lack of access to their financial accounts, and a final poignant entry expressing his thoughts of being on his own. The investigation into their financial history revealed a pattern of deception. Roberta had spent extravagantly on expensive gifts for her friends to project an outward image of prosperity, even as she neglected their mortgage payments. The home had eventually been sold at a foreclosure auction to a local real estate investor. Upon learning of the tragedy through a television news broadcast, the investor contacted the sheriff office to assist. He revealed that he had dealt exclusively with Roberta, who had repeatedly requested extensions to vacate the property, claiming she did not want to worry her husband. The final deadline for them to leave the home was the exact day of the tragedy. Yet, investigators discovered that Ken had recently purchased materials to renovate the porch, confirming he was completely unaware of the foreclosure. The scientific findings from the autopsy provided the most decisive clarity in the case. The medical examiner determined that the wound was a close contact injury with distinct physical evidence such as charring around the area, which could only occur if the muzzle of the firearm was pressed directly against the skin, contradicting Roberta's claim of an 18-inch distance. Furthermore, forensic analysis of Ken's hands revealed no gunshot residue, indicating that he had not attempted to grab, touch, or struggle for the weapon during the encounter. Additionally, mechanical testing of the firearm conducted by the State Police Forensic Laboratory revealed that the revolver possessed an exceptionally heavy trigger pull, requiring a deliberate and significant physical effort to discharge. This testing disproved the theory of an accidental slip or spontaneous discharge. Armed avec this scientific and circumstantial evidence, prosecutors upgraded the charges against Roberta from manslaughter to murder. The trial commenced in April 2017. Over 8 days of testimony, the prosecution presented a compelling case detailing the extensive financial deception, the hidden foreclosure, and the definitive forensic evidence that pointed to an intentional act. The defense sought to challenge the interpretation of the physical wound, but the scientific evidence remained robust. After 5 hours of careful deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict, finding Roberta Samard guilty of murder. At the age of 63, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The motives behind such crimes often stem from a profound psychological pressure to maintain a false persona of success and stability. In many instances, individuals who engage in prolonged financial deception find themselves trapped in a web of their own creation. As the reality of their situation closes in, the fear of exposure, social ruin, and the loss of respect from loved ones can drive them to extreme and desperate actions. These cases highlight the devastating consequences of unresolved shame and the avoidance of difficult truths within personal relationships. This tragedy offers profound lessons for families and communities alike. It underscores the critical importance of absolute transparency, open communication, and shared responsibility in financial matters within a marriage. Seeking professional counseling or financial guidance during times of distress can prevent the accumulation of pressure that leads to desperate choices. For law enforcement, the resolution of this case demonstrates the value of combining compassionate initial response with meticulous scene preservation, thorough background investigation, and rigorous scientific testing to ensure that justice is served accurately and objectively. The quiet and peaceful community of Millersburg, Oregon, with a population of approximately 3,000 residents, was typically known for its low crime rates and tranquil way of life. Located in Lynn County, halfway between the cities of Portland and Eugene, the town rarely experienced major criminal incidents. However, in the early morning hours of November 16, 2015, the silence of this normally serene neighborhood was shattered by the sound of sirens as local deputies responded to a highly urgent call placed to the emergency telephone line. The caller, Roberta Samard, was in a highly distressed state, reporting that her husband had been shot. She told the dispatcher that he was not supposed to be there and expressed confusion and despair. When the first deputies arrived at the residence, the darkness of the early morning still enveloped the property. They found Roberta Samard on the front porch, still holding her telephone. She appeared disoriented and immediately made a shocking admission to the officers, stating that she had shot her husband, Ken Samard. However, she quickly qualified this admission with a complex explanation, claiming that the shooting was a terrible accident. According to Roberta, she had been experiencing a severe mental health crisis and had planned to end her own life that morning. She believed her husband had already departed for his job, but she claimed he unexpectedly returned to the house, interrupting her plans. In the ensuing confusion, she asserted that the firearm accidentally discharged, striking her husband instead. The deputies took her into custody for her own safety and placed her in the back of a patrol car while investigators were summoned to the scene. The lead detective arrived quickly, as his own home was only a few minutes away. Upon entering the house, the investigators observed that the residence was exceptionally clean and organized. They walked through the front entryway toward a glass door that led to a spacious wooden back porch. There, they discovered the deceased body of 57-year-old Ken Samard. He was dressed for his workday, wearing a jacket, and his lunchbox, keys, and coffee mug were situated nearby on the porch. The firearm used in the incident, a small .38 caliber stainless steel revolver with distinctive pink grips, was located just inside the threshold near the glass door. At first glance, the scene appeared to support the possibility of an accident. There were no signs of a physical struggle, no overturned furniture, and no broken glass. The detective initially considered the theory that the husband might have returned home unexpectedly, causing his wife to mistake him for an intruder in the dark. However, the duty of the law enforcement officers was to remain objective and gather all available facts before reaching any conclusions. They needed to conduct a thorough search of the property and obtain a more detailed statement from Roberta to understand the exact sequence of events that led to this tragic loss of life. To understand the dynamic of the marriage and the individuals involved, investigators began exploring the background of the victim. Ken Samard was born in Albany, Oregon, on January 25, 1958. Raised in a blue-collar family alongside 3 siblings, Ken was known from a young age for his exceptional work ethic. By the age of 16, he was already working hard in the agricultural fields, operating heavy farming machinery. After graduating from high school in the year 1976, he enlisted in the United States Navy, serving honorably for 4 years. During his military service, he married his first wife, Vicky, but the challenges of long deployments eventually led to their separation and divorce. Ken was described by those who knew him as a kind, gentle, and resourceful man with a dry sense of humor. He was always willing to help others and possessed a deep love for his family and the outdoors. Following his military service, Ken returned to Oregon and worked as an engineer. He later married his second wife, Cindy, with whom he had 3 children named Brad, Matthew, and a daughter who fondly remembered their childhood camping, fishing, and hiking trips. Although his second marriage also ended in divorce after a few years, Ken remained a devoted father, focusing his energy on his children and his career. In the early 1990s, Ken secured a position at a local paper mill in Millersburg and joined the Oregon National Guard as a mechanic. It was during his time at the paper mill in the year 1996 that the 38-year-old Ken met the 43-year-old Roberta Bogart, who was working as a secretary at the facility. The two began dating, and after a short period, they traveled to Las Vegas, Nevada, where they were married. For many years, the couple seemed to enjoy a happy and stable life. In the early 2000s, they purchased a beautiful 5-bedroom house situated on a large piece of property with a substantial barn in Millersburg. Ken took great pride in this home and enjoyed maintaining the land. He was generous with Roberta, even purchasing a new vehicle for her to show his affection. However, their circumstances took a difficult turn when the paper mill closed, resulting in both of them losing their employment. Despite this setback, Ken proved to be incredibly resilient. He started his own roofing business to support the family. Tragically, while working on a roof, he suffered a severe fall that shattered both of his heels. This debilitating injury would have discouraged many, but Ken refused to give up. He decided to return to school to study heating, ventilation, and air conditioning engineering, hoping to build a new career and continue contributing to his household. By all accounts, Ken was highly optimistic about his studies and his future. As the investigation into the shooting proceeded, detectives conducted a formal interview with Roberta at the sheriff's office. She was not initially placed under arrest, as the authorities wanted to gather her voluntary account of the incident. During the interview, Roberta wept and explained that she had been overwhelmed by immense financial stress. She revealed that their beloved home was facing foreclosure, a reality that she claimed she could not bear to face. She reiterated her story that she had intended to end her own life because of this stress, and that Ken had unexpectedly returned, leading to the accidental discharge of the firearm. The detectives understood that financial pressure can indeed drive individuals to make desperate decisions, but they remained cautious, seeking physical evidence to confirm or refute her claims. Roberta described the moments before the shooting in detail. She claimed that after Ken left for work, she retrieved the .38 caliber revolver from their bedroom and paced around the house, struggling with her emotions. When Ken suddenly reopened the door and entered the home, she claimed he looked at her with confusion and asked what she was doing. She said she expressed her love for him, and as she raised the firearm, it discharged. The detectives noted that if a struggle had occurred over the weapon, an accidental discharge might be plausible. However, Roberta was hesitant and uncertain about many details, frequently stating that she did not know or could not remember exactly what had happened during those critical seconds. To obtain a clearer understanding of the physical dynamics, the investigators asked Roberta if she would be willing to participate in a voluntary reenactment of the event at the home. She agreed, and detectives accompanied her back to the house, which was still being processed for evidence. During the video-recorded reenactment, an investigator portrayed Ken, while Roberta demonstrated her actions. She indicated that she and her husband were standing extremely close to one another, perhaps 18 inches to 2 feet apart, near the glass back door. She showed how she raised her hand, asserting that the firearm discharged at this close distance as she moved it upward. While the trajectory of the projectile through the victim's neck was physically possible under this scenario, the detectives noticed a profound lack of genuine emotion from Roberta during the reenactment. There were no tears, and her demeanor seemed unusually detached, given that she was standing on the very spot where her husband had lost his life only hours earlier. The search of the home yielded critical pieces of physical evidence that began to challenge Roberta's narrative. Inside a laundry hamper, hidden beneath dirty clothing, investigators discovered a formal foreclosure notice, indicating that the home was scheduled for a public auction due to non-payment of the mortgage. This document bore only Roberta's signature, suggesting that she had actively concealed the financial crisis from her husband. In a well-organized household, the placement of such crucial legal paperwork at the very bottom of a laundry hamper was highly suspicious, pointing to a deliberate effort to keep the information secret. Further exploration of the home led investigators to Ken's personal office. Among his heating, ventilation, and air conditioning homework, they discovered a personal notebook. In this notebook, Ken had written down his innermost thoughts and feelings about his marriage. The writings revealed a highly controlled relationship where Ken felt powerless. He noted that Roberta exercised strict control over their finances, requiring him to ask for permission to spend any money, which frequently led to arguments. In contrast, Roberta spent money freely. Toward the end of his writings, Ken expressed a desire for independence, writing that perhaps he would soon be on his own. This discovery provided a potential motive, suggesting that the marriage was far from perfect and that Ken was contemplating leaving his wife. The investigation took a significant turn when a local real estate investor contacted the sheriff's office after seeing the news of the shooting on a local television broadcast. The investor explained that he had purchased the Samard home at a foreclosure auction several weeks prior. He revealed that he had been dealing exclusively with Roberta, who had requested multiple extensions to remain in the home, claiming she wanted to manage the transition without upsetting her husband. The investor had agreed to these extensions, and the final deadline for Roberta to vacate the property was the very day of the shooting. When investigators analyzed this timeline, they realized that Ken had no idea they had lost their home. In fact, Ken had recently purchased building materials to construct an addition to the back porch, a project he would never have initiated if he knew they were being evicted. This revelation suggested that Roberta had run out of time. The walls were closing in, and her extensive web of lies was about to be exposed to her husband. The investigators hypothesized that rather than facing the humiliation of her deception, Roberta chose to end her husband's life. The autopsy performed on Ken Samard confirmed this theory. The medical examiner determined that the fatal injury was a close contact wound, meaning the muzzle of the firearm was pressed directly against the victim's skin when it was fired. This finding directly contradicted Roberta's reenactment, where she claimed the firearm was 18 inches away. Furthermore, the autopsy revealed that there was no gunshot residue on Ken's hands, proving that he had not attempted to grab or struggle for the weapon. To further test the validity of her story, investigators sent the revolver to the State Police Forensic Laboratory. They wanted to determine the amount of force required to pull the trigger. The laboratory analysis revealed that the firearm possessed a very heavy trigger pull, requiring a deliberate and forceful squeeze to discharge. Investigators also learned from interviews with individuals who had previously accompanied Roberta to a firing range that she had struggled to operate this specific weapon due to the strength required to pull the trigger. This evidence strongly indicated that the discharge of the weapon could not have been a simple accident. It required a highly conscious and intentional physical effort. Armed with this overwhelming evidence, authorities upgraded the charges against Roberta Samard from manslaughter to murder. In April of the year 2017, her trial commenced at the Lynn County Courthouse in Albany, Oregon. The prosecution presented the forensic evidence, the hidden foreclosure documents, Ken's personal notebook, and the testimony of the real estate investor to demonstrate that Roberta had committed a calculated act of murder to prevent her husband from discovering the financial ruin she had caused. The defense argued that the shooting was the result of a tragic accident during a mental health crisis, but the physical evidence proved otherwise. After 8 days of testimony and legal arguments, the jury deliberated for approximately 5 hours before returning a verdict of guilty. Roberta Samard was subsequently sentenced to 25 years of incarceration. This tragic case offers profound lessons about the importance of honesty, communication, and transparency in relationships. The pressure to maintain a false image of wealth and success can lead individuals down a dangerous path of deception, creating a fragile house of cards that will inevitably collapse. When faced with financial difficulties, seeking help and communicating openly with loved ones is essential to prevent desperation from turning into tragedy. For law enforcement, the meticulous examination of the physical scene, the utilization of forensic science, and the careful analysis of the victim's personal writings were crucial in uncovering the truth and ensuring that justice was served for Ken Samard, a respected and hard-working man whose memory continues to be honored by his loving family. The quiet, mist-shrouded community of Millersburg, Oregon, nestled gently in Lynn County between the larger cities of Portland and Eugene, had long enjoyed a reputation as a peaceful haven. With a population hovering around 3,000 residents, the town was a place where people knew their neighbors, left their doors unlocked, and rarely expected to hear the piercing wails of emergency sirens in the dead of night. It was a blue-collar town built on hard work, agricultural roots, and a shared sense of safety. On the 16th of November in the year 2015, however, this serene atmosphere was shattered in the early morning hours. The silence of the dawn was broken by the urgent dispatch of local sheriff deputies responding to a frantic 911 call originating from a spacious, well-kept home. The caller was Roberta Samard, a woman in her early 60s who was hysterical on the phone, claiming that her husband had been shot. She cried out to the dispatcher that he was not supposed to be there, and that a terrible event had unfolded. When the first responders arrived at the scene while it was still dark outside, they found Roberta on the front porch, clutching her phone and appearing visibly disoriented. She immediately made a startling admission to the deputies, stating that she had shot her husband, but asserted that it was a horrific accident born of a deeply personal crisis. According to her initial story, she had been consumed by a severe emotional struggle and had planned to end her own life. She believed her husband, Ken Samard, had already departed for his workday, but he had unexpectedly returned to the house, interrupting her desperate plan. In the ensuing confusion, she claimed the firearm she was holding discharged accidentally, striking Ken and ending his life. The initial assessment of the scene seemed, at first glance, to support a tragic and bizarre accident. As investigators stepped through the front entrance of the home, they walked toward a glass door that opened onto a wooden back porch. There, they discovered the body of 57-year-old Ken Samard. He was dressed fully for his workday, wearing a heavy jacket and lying near his lunchbox, his coffee mug, and his set of keys. The physical layout suggested a man who was on the verge of stepping out of his home to begin his daily routine. Inside the threshold of the door lay the weapon, a distinctive stainless steel point, .38 caliber snub-nosed revolver, equipped with pink grips, a firearm typically associated with female ownership. There were no signs of a struggle within the home. No furniture was overturned, no glass was shattered, and the neat, tidy residence showed no indications of a violent confrontation. To a casual observer, it appeared to be a devastating domestic mishap occurring in the dim morning light, where confusion and poor visibility had led to an unspeakable error. Yet seasoned detectives cano ove kep that when a story seems to fit too neatly, or when the details begin to whisper of hidden motives, a deeper investigation is required. The sheriff department took Roberta into custody, placing her in the back of a patrol unit for her own safety, and to begin the systematic process of gathering facts, securing a search warrant, and looking beyond the superficial presentation of a tragic accident. To understand the tragedy that unfolded on that cold November morning, one must look at the life of Ken Samard, a man remembered by his family, friends, and colleagues as an exceptionally kind, industrious, and generous soul. Born in Albany, Oregon, on the 25th of January in the year 1958, Ken grew up in a traditional blue-collar family alongside his siblings. From a very young age, he demonstrated an innate mechanical aptitude and a deep love for labor. By the age of 16, he was already operating heavy agricultural machinery in the local fields, handling windrowers, combines, and plows with ease. After graduating high school in the year 1976, Ken chose to serve his country by joining the United States Navy. He married his high school girlfriend, Vicky, and spent 4 years on active duty, stationed in various locations across the nation. Friends recalled that Ken possessed a dry, delightful sense of humor and a genuine, selfless desire to assist anyone in need. He was the type of person who would go far out of his way to help a friend fix a vehicle or master a new practical skill. After completing his military service, Ken returned to Oregon and transitioned into civilian life as an engineer. However, the prolonged periods of deployment and the challenges of adjusting to civilian life took a toll on his first marriage, leading to an amicable divorce. Not long after, Ken met his second wife, Cindy, with whom he shared 3 children named Brad, Cindy, and Matthew. Ken was a devoted father who cherished spending time vekepte, hot his kids in the great outdoors, teaching them how to camp, hike, fish, hunt, and even pan for gold in the mountain streams. Despite his best efforts to maintain a stable family life, his second marriage also dissolved after several years, leaving Ken, then in his early 30s, to rebuild his life once more. He secured a stable position as a mechanic and engineer at a local paper mill in Millersburg and joined the Oregon National Guard, where his mechanical expertise made him a valued member of his unit. It was during this period of professional focus that Ken met Roberta Bogart, a secretary working at the same paper mill, in the year 1996. Roberta, a mother of 2 sons from a previous marriage, was 43 years old at the time, while Ken was 38. The two began dating, and before long, they traveled to Las Vegas to be married, embark on a shared journey, and eventually purchase their 5-bedroom dream home on a spacious plot of land in Millersburg. For the first 13 years of their marriage, Ken and Roberta seemed to live an idyllic life. Ken took great pride in spoiling his wife, purchasing a new car for her, and maintaining their beautiful property. However, their security was severely tested when the local paper mill closed down, leaving both of them unemployed. Displaying the resilience that defined his character, Ken refused to succumb to despair. He started his own roofing business, working tirelessly to provide for his household. But tragedy struck again when Ken suffered a devastating fall from a roof, shattering both of his heels. Even this severe physical setback could not break his spirit. Determined to adapt and find a new way to contribute, Ken enrolled in school to study heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system engineering. He was highly motivated, excelling in his classes, and looking forward to a new professional chapter. To his grown children and his extended family, Ken appeared to be a grandfather who had successfully weathered life's storms and was standing on the precipice of a bright, stable future alongside a loving wife. As detectives began their investigation into Kenneth's death, however, they quickly discovered that the domestic harmony Robert presented was a carefully constructed facade. While waiting for a formal search warrant to be drafted and approved by a judge, investigators conducted an interview with Roberta at the sheriff department. She painted a picture of immense financial pressure, explaining that the couple was facing the imminent foreclosure of their beloved home. She claimed that the weight of this impending loss had driven her to the brink of despair, leading her to plan her own demise. She stated that when Ken unexpectedly walked back into the house, she was startled, and as she raised the weapon toward her own head, it discharged, fatally striking her husband in the neck. In an effort to verify her sequence of events, detectives proposed an unusual investigative tool: a voluntary, video-recorded crime scene reenactment. Roberta agreed to participate, returning to the home where her husband of nearly 20 years had died only hours prior, she showed a striking lack of emotion. She walked through the motions with a detective acting as Ken, demonstrating how she held the pink-gripped revolver approximately 18 inches away from him when it fired. This reenactment, rather than vindicating Roberta, became one of the critical turning points for investigators. While her description of the physical trajectory of the bullet initially seemed plausible due to the height difference between her and Ken, her absolute lack of tears, grief, or remorse during the reconstruction of her husband's final moments raised immediate suspicions. Furthermore, when detectives executed the search warrant on the residence, they began finding evidence that directly contradicted her claims of a transparent, shared financial crisis. In a home that was otherwise meticulously clean, organized, and tidy, investigators discovered a crucial document hidden at the very bottom of a laundry hamper. It was a formal foreclosure notice announcing the sale of the property due to non-payment of the mortgage. Strikingly, the paperwork bore only Roberta S.'s signature. Ken S.'s signature was entirely absent from the documents. This unusual filing location suggested that Roberta had been actively working to hide the financial ruin from her husband. The search of Ken S.'s home office yielded an even more poignant and revealing piece of evidence. Tucked away among his textbook materials for his heating, ventilation, and air conditioning classes was a personal notebook. In this journal, Ken had recorded his deepest, most private thoughts about the state of his marriage. The entries painted a vivid picture of a relationship defined by intense financial control and manipulation. Ken wrote of how Roberta controlled every aspect of their finances, forcing him to ask for permission to spend even small amounts of money, while she spent freely. He documented the constant arguments that erupted whenever he questioned their financial status, leaving him feeling isolated, helpless, and increasingly unhappy. Toward the end of his self-reflective writings, Ken had written a chillingly prophetic sentence, noting that perhaps he would soon be on his own. This notebook provided an authentic, unfiltered voice from beyond the grave, revealing to investigators that Ken was not only unaware of the true extent of their financial ruin, but was actively contemplating leaving his wife. The depth of Roberta S.'s deception became fully apparent the day after the shooting, when a local real estate investor named Brian saw her mugshot on the 11 o'clock news. Shocked, he contacted the sheriff department to inform them that he had purchased the Samard home at a foreclosure auction weeks prior. He explained that he had dealt exclusively with Roberta, who had claimed that she handled all household finances and did not want to worry her husband with the details. She had repeatedly begged for extensions to vacate the property, and the investor had kindly granted her several delays. The absolute deadline for them to pack their belongings and leave the home was the very day of the shooting, the 16th of November. Yet, when deputies had processed the scene, they found no cardboard boxes, no packed suitcases, and no preparations for a move. Instead, they found materials that Ken had recently purchased to build an expansion onto their back porch, a project he would never have initiated had he known they were being evicted that morning. The timeline revealed a desperate woman whose elaborate web of lies was about to be completely exposed. The moment Ken attempted to leave for work on that final morning, he would have confronted a reality he could no longer ignore, and Roberta's house of cards would have collapsed entirely. With the financial motive firmly established, investigators turned to the physical evidence to dismantle Roberta's claim of an accidental shooting during a suicide intervention. The subsequent autopsy performed by the medical examiner provided the definitive forensic proof needed to seek a conviction. The examination revealed that Ken had suffered a close contact gunshot wound. This meant that the muzzle of the .38 caliber revolver was pressed directly against the skin of his neck when it was fired, leaving distinct charring and soot deposits around the entry wound. This finding completely disproved Roberta's reenactment, in which she claimed the weapon was at least 18 inches away. Additionally, the autopsy revealed that there was absolutely no gunshot residue on Ken's hands. Had Ken attempted to grab the firearm, struggle for control of it, or push it away, his hands would have been coated in the chemical residues of the discharge. The clean state of his hands indicated that he had never touched or struggled with the weapon. Finally, testing conducted by the Oregon State Police Forensic Laboratory on the revolver demonstrated that it possessed an exceptionally heavy trigger pull. It was a double action mechanism that required a significant, deliberate physical effort to fire, making an accidental discharge due to a simple bump or startle response mechanically impossible. Roberta had to squeeze the trigger with deliberate force to make the weapon fire. Confronted with the overwhelming weight of the forensic and financial evidence, the state upgraded the charges against Roberta from manslaughter to murder. In April of the year 2017, her trial commenced at the Lynn County Courthouse in Albany. The prosecution presented a seamless narrative of status anxiety, deception, and cold blood calculation, arguing that Roberta had chosen to end her husband's life rather than face the humiliation of her financial lies being exposed. The defense tried desperately to argue that the wound was not a contact wound and that the shooting was a tragic accident born of mental distress, but the physical science was undeniable. After 8 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 5 hours before returning a verdict of guilty. Roberta, then 63 years old, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Though she continued to maintain her innocence, the justice system had delivered a clear message. The tragic loss of Ken Samard offers profound societal and personal lessons about the destructive nature of status anxiety and the vital importance of open, honest communication within relationships. Roberta's desperate actions were driven by a pathological need to maintain an illusion of wealth and success, prioritizing social appearance over the life of her partner. This case highlights how the stigma surrounding financial distress can lead individuals to construct dangerous webs of deception. To prevent such tragedies, communities must foster environments where financial struggles are destigmatized and individuals feel safe seeking assistance rather than resorting to isolation and lies. Furthermore, this case underscores the critical role of modern forensic science and systematic police work in uncovering the truth. By maintaining a healthy, professional skepticism, thoroughly analyzing physical evidence, and looking beyond initial emotional appeals, investigators were able to secure justice for Ken. Ultimately, this story serves as a powerful reminder that the truth has a voice of its own, capable of speaking clearly even from beyond the grave, ensuring that justice prevails and the memory of a good, decent man is honored. The phenomenon of domestic crimes stemming from hidden financial desperation is a deeply troubling aspect of human psychology that criminologists and sociologists study to understand how ordinary lives can disintegrate into tragedy. In many of these cases, the primary motive is not a sudden burst of passion or a long history of physical conflict, but rather the slow, silent accumulation of lies and the overwhelming dread of exposure. When an individual constructs a complex facade of prosperity and stability while their actual life is crumbling, they create a psychological pressure cooker. The motivation for the crime often becomes the preservation of this artificial reality at any cost. To the perpetrator, the prospect of their spouse discovering that their dream home has been lost, that their savings are gone, and that their entire lifestyle is a sham feels more terrifying than the act of violence itself. This form of behavior is closely linked to extreme social shame and a profound lack of healthy coping mechanisms. Instead of facing the consequences of financial mismanagement, which would require vulnerability, honesty, and perhaps temporary humiliation, the individual chooses a path of ultimate destruction. This pattern is seen with alarming frequency in quiet suburban communities where outward appearances are highly valued. Neighbors often perceive these households as perfect, which only reinforces the perpetrator's obsession with maintaining the illusion. The frequency of these cases highlights a broader societal issue where personal worth is heavily tied to material success, and where individuals feel they have no safe outlet to admit failure. When open communication breaks down within a marriage, and financial infidelity takes root, it lays a silent and dangerous foundation that can eventually lead to irreversible harm. In analyzing the specific methods that law enforcement officers rely upon to dismantle these deceptive narratives, it becomes clear that physical evidence and objective science are the ultimate arbiters of truth. Perpetrators of domestic crimes often believe that because they are the sole surviving witness, they can easily convince investigators of a tragic accident or a sudden mental health crisis. They rely on the assumption that their emotional displays and their history of being a seemingly loving partner will shield them from deep scrutiny. However, modern crime scene investigation is built on the principle that physical evidence does not lie, and it cannot be manipulated by emotional performances. Detectives look for subtle inconsistencies between the physical state of the scene and the verbal story provided by the suspect. One of the most critical elements is the positioning of the victim and the items around them. In a genuine accident, the layout of the home, the clothing of the victim, and the presence of daily items usually tell a story of normal routine interrupted by chance. When a story is fabricated, the details begin to clash. A suspect might claim a sudden confrontation or an unexpected return, but the victim's prepared lunchbox, work keys, and outerwear suggests they were completely focused on their daily routine and were caught entirely off guard. Furthermore, the location of important financial or legal documents in highly unusual places, such as hidden deep within household chores or storage areas, signals to investigators that one party was actively hiding vital information from the other. This immediately shifts the focus of the investigation from a simple tragedy to a complex web of deception. The sophistication of such criminals is often surprisingly low, despite their ability to maintain long-term lies. While they may be skilled at fabricating excuses to their spouses and families for months or even no years, their planning falls apart completely when confronted with the immediate reality of their actions and the scientific tools of law enforcement. They frequently make the mistake of believing that the dark, or a lack of direct witnesses, will prevent the truth from coming to light. They do not anticipate the precision of forensic science. For instance, the analysis of a wound can reveal the exact distance from which a firearm was discharged. A perpetrator might claim that a weapon went off accidentally during a struggle from a distance of several inches or feet. But forensic pathologists can determine through the presence of specific markings and residue on the skin that the muzzle was in direct contact with the victim. This scientific reality instantly dismantles any claim of a distant accident or an involuntary discharge during a struggle. Additionally, the presence or absence of gunshot residue on the hands of the victim is a crucial piece of the puzzle. If a suspect claims that the victim tried to intervene or grab the weapon, the lack of residue on the victim's hands strongly suggests they never had the opportunity to touch or even get close to the firearm. Finally, the physical mechanics of the weapon itself are analyzed. Forensic technicians test the trigger pull weight of the firearm to determine how much force is required to fire it. A heavy trigger pull weight proves that the weapon could not have gone off with a simple, accidental touch, but rather required a deliberate, forceful squeeze of the trigger, indicating absolute intent. Drawing life lessons from these tragic events is essential for the prevention of similar cases in the future. The most profound lesson is the vital importance of financial transparency and open communication in any relationship. Marriages and partnerships must be built on a foundation of shared responsibility, where both individuals have equal access to and knowledge of the household finances. When one partner completely abdicates financial control or allows the other to handle all monetary matters without any oversight, it creates an environment where deception can flourish. Financial infidelity, which involves hiding debts, secret spending, or failing to pay critical bills like mortgages, is often the first step on a very dark path. Families and couples must cultivate an atmosphere where it is safe to admit mistakes, ask for help, and discuss financial struggles without the fear of extreme condemnation or abandonment. Society must also work to destigmatize financial failure. Losing a job, facing foreclosure, or experiencing business setbacks are incredibly difficult life events, but they are not reflections of a person's core worth, and they can be overcome with honesty, hard work, and support. If the perpetrator in this case had simply possessed the courage to tell the truth, their spouse would have undoubtedly worked through the crisis. Vekep, had them, and a life would have been saved. Furthermore, extended family members and friends should remain observant of subtle shifts in behavior or unusual comments about household matters, and encourage open dialogue when they sense that a loved one is carrying an overwhelming burden alone. To assist law enforcement agencies in resolving these complex cases more rapidly and efficiently, several key strategies and experiences can be shared. First and foremost, responding officers must treat every scene as a potential crime scene from the very beginning, even when the initial call suggests an accident or a self-inflicted incident. Maintaining a high level of professional skepticism is crucial. Officers should secure the scene immediately to prevent any contamination of physical evidence. Second, the integration of multidisciplinary teams is highly effective. Having detectives, forensic technicians, and financial investigators working in close coordination from the onset allows the department to build a comprehensive picture of the suspect's motive and actions simultaneously. While physical forensic experts analyze the ballistics and the scene, financial analysts can dig into the suspect's background, uncovering hidden debts, foreclosure notices, and auction sales that provide an immediate motive. Third, the use of recorded video reenactments with the suspect at the scene can be an invaluable investigative tool. By allowing the suspect to physically demonstrate their version of events, detectives can compare those physical movements directly with the biological and ballistic evidence. Inconsistencies between the suspect as physical reenactment and the scientific findings are highly compelling to juries and often lead to confessions or swift convictions. Finally, community outreach and strong relationships with local business owners, such as real estate investors and utility companies, can help police gather crucial background information quickly, as these external parties often have interactions with the suspect that the family knows nothing about. To fully understand the tragedy that occurred, we must look back at the life of Kenneth Arlen Samard, a man whose story is defined by resilience, dedication, and a deep love for his family. Born in the city of Albany, Oregon, on the 25th of January in the year 1958, Kenneth grew up as one of 4 siblings in a hard-working, blue-collar household. From a young age, he demonstrated a strong work ethic, spending his teenage years working in the local agricultural fields, operating heavy machinery such as combiners and plows. Upon graduating from high school in the year 1976, Kenneth chose to serve his country by joining the United States Navy. During his 4 years of military service, he was stationed in various locations, learning valuable engineering and mechanical skills that would shape his future career. Though his first marriage to his high school girlfriend did not survive the challenges of military life and deployment, Kenneth returned home to Oregon, determined to build a good life. He possessed a dry, warm sense of humor and a reputation for being an incredibly kind person who would go out of his way to help anyone in need. He eventually married his second wife, and together they welcomed 3 children, Bradley, Danielle, and Matthew. Kenneth was a devoted father who loved taking his children camping, fishing, hunting, and gold panning, creating cherished memories in the beautiful Oregon wilderness. Although his second marriage also ended in divorce after several years, Kenneth remained fully committed to his children and focused his energy on his work.